Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Before we get started, don't forget to hit the subscribe button if you want to hear more fascinating stories like this one. Today I'm going to share something very personal with you, a secret I've been keeping for quite some time. Let me start at the beginning. My name is Lily and I'm married to an amazing man called David. David is the kind of man who lights up a room with his smile. Kind, thoughtful, and genuinely loving. He had been a single father to his son Jake for several years before I came into their lives. I remember first meeting Jake when he was just 18 years old. He was a quiet, reserved young man with an easy smile, and it didn't take long for me to grow fond of him. Over the years, Jake and I became close. David and I never had children together, so I took Jake under my wing, offering support when he needed it, and being someone he could always count on. I enjoyed watching him grow from a shy teenager into a confident young man. Now, at 21, Jake is mature, funny, and surprisingly insightful. We've had so many late-night conversations, laughs, and even some deep talks about life and love. But then something happened that neither of us expected and, well, it changed everything. One evening, not long ago, David had left on a business trip, leaving the house unusually quiet. It was one of those chilly, rainy nights and I was feeling exhausted after a busy week. I decided to unwind with a long, relaxing bath. I had the house to myself, or so I thought. The warmth of the water and the soft lighting felt soothing, and I sat back and let my mind wander as I soaked in the bath, letting the gentle scent of lavender soothe my thoughts. I was lost in a daydream. Suddenly I heard a soft creak, as if someone had entered the room. My heart skipped a beat, and I sat up slightly, glancing towards the door. Standing there with an apologetic look on his face was Jake. I felt my cheeks flush as I grabbed the edge of the tub, instinctively covering myself. "Oh, Jake," I stammered, my voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't realize you were home." Jake's eyes widened and he quickly looked away, though I could see he was trying to say something. "I'm sorry, Lily," he said, his face flushed as well. "I didn't know you were in here. I just forgot my charger." I nodded, feeling my heart still racing. "It's okay," I replied, trying to keep my voice calm. "Just grab what you need." As he walked across the bathroom, I couldn't help but notice how tall he had become, with a strong, athletic build from his years playing football. There was a softness in his eyes as he turned back to me, almost as if he was reluctant to leave. He hesitated at the door, casting a last glance in my direction. "I'll let you get back to your bath," he murmured, giving a faint smile before stepping out and closing the door behind him. When he was gone, I found myself sitting in the bath, my head spinning. I couldn't shake the feeling of his gaze, the warmth that lingered from that brief moment. I told myself it was nothing, just an awkward encounter. But later that night, as I lay in bed, I kept replaying that moment in my mind. Days went by, and I tried to put it out of my mind, but it felt like something had shifted between us. Our conversations were filled with an unspoken tension, a subtle awareness that neither of us wanted to acknowledge. In those moments, I began to wonder, was this feeling mutual, or was it all in my head? Then, one evening, the opportunity presented itself again. Jake and I were home alone, and I was in the living room, curled up with a book. He casually walked in, joined me on the couch, and we started talking about our days, our dreams, the things we missed about being younger. The conversation grew more intimate as the evening wore on, and we found ourselves sitting closer together, his arm brushing against mine. At one point, there was a silence between us, a tension heavy in the air. He turned to look at me, his eyes soft but intense, and there was something there that neither of us could deny. "Lily," he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. I looked up, feeling a flutter in my chest. "Yes, Jake," I replied, my voice just as low. He hesitated, as if gathering his thoughts. "I wanted to tell you something," he said, his eyes never leaving mine. "But I didn't know if I should. I don't want to make things awkward." I felt my heart race as I looked back at him, a small smile playing on my lips. "You can tell me anything, Jake," I said, feeling a warmth settle between us. He leaned in closer, his face just inches from mine. I think I feel something more for you," he whispered, his words sending a shiver down my spine. We both froze, the weight of his confession hanging in the air. And in that moment, something stirred inside me, something I hadn't allowed myself to acknowledge before. Gently, I reached out and placed my hand on his. His fingers curled around mine, and he looked at me with a vulnerability I'd never seen before. Without thinking, I leaned forward and our lips met in a soft, hesitant kiss. It was short, gentle, but it spoke volumes. When we pulled away, we were both breathless, our eyes locked in a silent understanding. The room fell into a deep, charged silence as we pulled away from that first tentative kiss. I couldn't help but search his face for any sign of regret, but there was only warmth and a little surprise in Jake's eyes, as if he hadn't expected this any more than I had. For a few heartbeats, we just sat there, our hands still intertwined, both of us absorbing the reality of what had just happened. But before I could speak, Jake leaned in again, his hand gently cupping my face as he pressed his lips to mine once more, this time with a little more confidence. I felt a thrill run through me, and without thinking, I let myself get lost in that kiss, letting the weight of everything we'd both held back flow out. When we finally broke apart, Jake's hand lingered on my cheek, his thumb brushing gently against my skin. "I've been feeling this way for a while now," he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. "I just never thought you'd feel the same way." I smiled softly, feeling a strange combination of relief and exhilaration. "Neither did I admitted, my voice catching as I tried to express everything I was feeling. "It's unexpected, but I can't deny it, not anymore." The rest of the evening passed in a soft, dreamy haze. We talked for hours, sharing things we'd never told anyone else, our fears, our insecurities, our hopes. I found myself seeing Jake in a whole new light, appreciating the depth of his kindness, his intelligence, and his maturity. It was as if all the years we'd spent as a family had been transformed into something deeper, something neither of us had expected, but which we could no longer deny. As midnight approached, I glanced at the clock and let out a small sigh. "It's getting late," I murmured, though I felt a pang of reluctance at the thought of saying goodnight. Jake nodded, but his eyes didn't waver. "I know," he said quietly, "but can we just stay like this for a little while longer?" I nodded, and he put his arm around me, pulling me close. As we sat there in comfortable silence, I felt truly at peace for the first time in a long time, as if everything in the world had fallen into place. The days that followed were filled with small, stolen moments that only deepened our bond. We shared quick glances and warm smiles, brushing hands as we passed, and soft lingering touches that spoke louder than words ever could. Every interaction was a reminder of the feelings we'd finally allowed ourselves to embrace. Then one evening, while David was still out of town, Jake and I found ourselves alone again, sharing a quiet dinner in the kitchen. There was a lightness in the air, a sense of intimacy that had grown naturally over the past few days. As we finished our meal, I could feel Jake watching me with that familiar warmth in his eyes. "Lily," he murmured, reaching across the table to take my hand. "Being with you like this, I'm the happiest I've been in a long time." His words touched me deeply, and I squeezed his hand, a smile tugging at my lips. "Me too," I replied quietly, my heart racing as I looked into his eyes. "This is something I never imagined, but it feels right." Afterwards, we moved into the living room and sank into the cozy warmth of the couch as the evening wore on. Jake put an arm around my shoulders, and I rested my head against his chest, feeling his heart beating against my cheek. For the first time, I felt completely safe, like I'd found a place where I belonged. As the night grew darker, we finally drifted off, content in each other's arms. In those quiet moments, lying there wrapped in his warmth, I awoke the next morning to sunlight streaming through the curtains and warming my face. I blinked to adjust to the light and found myself still nestled against Jake on the couch, his arm wrapped protectively around me. When I stirred, he opened his eyes and gave me a soft, sleepy smile. "Good morning," he murmured, his voice still hoarse from sleep. I couldn't help but smile back. "Good morning, Jake." We shared a quiet moment, each of us savouring the warmth and comfort of simply being together. But as the reality of the morning set in, I realised we couldn't stay like this forever. I gently extricated myself from his arms and we got up to start the day. In the weeks that followed, our bond deepened, though we both knew we had to be careful. Every small gesture, every soft smile, became a silent acknowledgement of the connection we shared. Jake often found excuses to be near me, offering to help with chores around the house, lingering in the kitchen while I cooked, or joining me for quiet evening walks in the neighbourhood. One evening, as we walked through the nearby park, he took my hand in his, and our fingers intertwined. The world seemed to fade away, leaving just the two of us walking under the canopy of trees, the golden sunset casting a warm glow around us. We paused near a small lake, watching the last rays of sunlight dance across the water. "It feels strange, doesn't it?" I said quietly, looking up at him. He nodded, looking pensive. "Strange, but right," he replied, squeezing my hand. "I don't know how else to explain it." We stood there for a while, just taking in the beauty of the moment. As the sky darkened, we walked back to the house, each of us feeling a quiet peace settle over us. Then came a night that took our relationship to a new level of trust and intimacy. It was Jake's birthday, and David was away again for a few days. Jake had mentioned that he did not want a big celebration, so I decided to surprise him with a quiet candlelit dinner at home. I set the table with his favourite dishes and lit a few candles to create a warm, inviting atmosphere. When Jake walked in, his eyes widened in surprise and a smile spread across his face. "Lily, this is incredible," he said, looking genuinely touched. We enjoyed the meal, talking and laughing, sharing memories of the past and dreams for the future. As the evening wore on, I felt the familiar warmth of his gaze on me, a quiet intensity that made my heart skip a beat. I reached across the table and took his hand in mine, and he looked at me with a tenderness that made everything else fade away. After dinner, we went into the living room and settled down on the couch with a cozy blanket. Jake gently pulled me closer, and I rested my head on his shoulder, feeling a sense of calm settle over me. He brushed a strand of hair from my face, his fingers lingering as he looked into my eyes. Without a word, he leaned in and pressed his lips to mine in a kiss that was both soft and full of meaning. I melted into him, lost in the moment. We stayed there, wrapped in each other's warmth, talking in whispers and sharing quiet moments until the early hours of the morning. One weekend, we decided to take a day trip out of town. We found a beautiful trail that wound through the woods to a hidden waterfall. The walk was peaceful, just the two of us and the sounds of nature around us. When we reached the waterfall, we sat on a rock at the edge of the water, our feet dipping into the cool, refreshing stream. Jake turned to me, his eyes filled with wonder. "I can't believe how lucky I am," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Being here with you, it's more than I could have ever hoped for." I smiled and reached out to touch his cheek. "I feel the same way, Jake," I replied softly, feeling the weight of everything we'd been through together. He pulled me into his arms and held me close as we sat there, listening to the gentle sound of the water. It was as if we were in our own little world, hidden away from everything else. In this quiet, secluded place, we allowed ourselves to just be, to exist in the moment without worry or fear. Back home, our lives returned to their quiet rhythm, but each day held a new sense of excitement. Every morning, Jake would leave me a little note, sometimes a simple "good morning" or "have a great day," sometimes a short message that made me smile. I'd find these notes in the kitchen, on the bathroom mirror, or tucked into a book I was reading. It was a small gesture, but it meant the world to me, a constant reminder of our bond. One evening, as I was cleaning up in the kitchen, Jake came up behind me and wrapped his arms around my waist. I leaned back against him, savoring the warmth of his embrace. "You know," he murmured, "every moment with you is my favorite." I turned to look at him, my heart full. "Mine too," I replied, feeling a contentment I'd never felt before. As the months passed, our bond grew stronger. Every shared glance, every soft smile, and every gentle touch became a testament to the love we'd found in each other.